Welcome to the Conscious Living Podcast, conversations to educate, empower, and enlighten our world. An uplifting and inspiring series of conversations and talks with your host, Jackie Woodside. We are educating minds, empowering lives, and enlightening souls to create a world where love prevails. In this engaging podcast, we deliver exciting, positive, transformative talks and teachings designed to elevate your life. Now, let's join our host, Jackie Woodside, for this week's session.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here again for the next episode of the Conscious Living Podcast, where we are here to educate, empower, and enlighten our world. My name is Jackie Woodside. I'm the host and founder of the Conscious Living Podcast, and I really want to thank you for taking a moment out of your day to think about living consciously, to think about what it means to live a conscious life, and to enhance your walk toward creating a better world for all of us. So thank you so much for being here today. You are in for a treat as I bring together just a dear, brilliant, enlightened soul and friend of mine, Jayne Warrilow, who is from the UK but resides here in the US in Ohio. Jayne is a business and executive coach and the founder of Sacred Changemakers and also the Coaches Business School. She is an extraordinary entrepreneur, incredibly wise, and someone who has coached business leaders and celebrities literally all over the world. She is a by referral only executive coach and is able to be very selective in who she works with and what she wants to accomplish. She's also the author of the book called The Secret Language of Resonance, is what we're going to talk about today. And she also, in all of her width of breadth and depth of brilliance, wrote a book about the emergence of AI in our world. So there's so much to talk about together, Jayne Warrilow. Thank you for being with us on the Conscious Living Podcast. Say a few more things about yourself to help people get to know you a little better.
Oh my gosh, Jackie, that was just such a brilliant introduction. As you were speaking, I was thinking, I really want to be her when I grow up.
I want to be you when I grow up.
So yeah, it was lovely and amazing to just sit back and think of, how amazing that I'm now a coach that can choose the people that I work with, and I am by referral only now. I was just thinking, I remember in the early days wanting that so much, and now here I am. So yeah, phenomenal. Thank you for that introduction. I am so excited to be here. I think there's not a lot I can add to the introduction that you said there, except I think that, this is the Conscious Living Podcast. So I'd just like to tell everybody that I think I would attribute all of my success to this one little thing, which is I'm an incredibly curious human.
So get that. Jayne, I'm just curious, just to get us going here, and I want to get into your book and the secret language of resonance, but even more high level than that as we get warmed up here, what does it mean to you, like conscious living? It's a phrase that we kind of toss around, and shopping at Whole Foods or reading Yoga Magazine, or, I got my crystals on my nightstand, or I read Deepak Chopra. I don't know. It's kind of become like a cultural icon, and yet it is a profound experience in the human condition. So I'm curious for you, like, what is it? Because I know you're so committed to consciousness and conscious living. What is it for you, and what does it mean?
It's a really interesting question, because I think the way that I would respond to this as well would probably change, because as you know, we don't really have any kind of definitions that we settled on as humans as to what consciousness is, how we actually begin to develop it as humans from being really tiny, coming into living a conscious life and what that means. But to me, it really does align with what we're going to be talking today, which is what I call resonance. And so I do work with models that I've developed that show different levels of consciousness. And so, at the lower levels, for me, that's very much it's a physical world that we live in. And I think one of the biggest kind of awakening moments I had around consciousness was realizing that everybody lives at a different level of consciousness. And what does that mean? That actually means they live in a different world. right? So when we look out in the world today and I see all the conflicts, between countries and nations, and then the political divide in the US, it's also happening in the UK and, in the European Union, all of the kind of challenges I think we have as humans could be solved through an elevation or a rise in consciousness. Because when we live in a world where we are in the lower levels of consciousness and that vibratory pattern and frequency, we have certain beliefs about the world that, it's kind of a physical world. I have to see it to believe it. This is the life that I'm in. It's hard down here at these lower levels of consciousness. I'm fighting to survive. I'm trying to put food on the table for my kids. Like, I haven't got time to go and sit in a yoga studio and do meditation because I'm just trying to survive down here.
Just getting by.
And that's very much to me where a lot of humans live on the planet, unfortunately, today. But for those of us that have access to development and different things, then we're able to kind of raise our awareness to the world that we live in and start to shift into a different vibratory pattern, which I would start to talk about in terms of willful consciousness. Like, now we start to think about our ego, we start to build our confidence in the world, find our place, and start to move around the world in a different kind of way than when we're survival mode. And then if we continue our development, and this is why I say an incredibly curious human is what's got me from these lower levels to be able to move up. And it's not about getting to the top and going to an ashram in India and like forgetting life, right? That's not what it is. It's, do you understand the levels? Can you move around them? And so from willful, we then maybe go to intellectual consciousness where I know things in my head. I'm really aware of how I think, right? And I've come up through the heart, so I know what I feel. And now this is a very different world because I'm speaking my truth. I understand my place, but I also have the self-reflective capacity to reflect on who I'm being and what I'm doing and who I'm becoming and what my patterns and my habits and my beliefs are and how they're shaping the world for me. And finally, we get up to the higher levels of consciousness, which, yes, we can get them. You can think about the very high levels of altered states of consciousness, which we might access through, meditation or yoga or a spiritual journey, or even through a psychedelic. But that's where we really expand our consciousness. We understand unity. We understand we're all interconnected, that our life is sacred. It's not just the life that we're living down in survival mode where we're human just trying to get by until we die, but that there's more meaning in life, that we have a purpose. Our soul has a calling. And for us to live a fulfilling and impactful life, we need to get on that track. And we need to realize why we're here, what our genius is, and what this life is all about for us. And I think that those are questions that really only reside when, the survival needs have taken, we've kind of dealt with those. And now we have the privilege, I think, of really considering what it means to live an aware and a conscious life. So that's kind of, I think, one way of describing it for me. But this idea that everybody who's at different levels is literally in a different world from each other.
Right. Oh, that's so brilliant. Yeah. So it is the level of consciousness that you are living in that determines what you see and how you see it, how you interpret the world around you. So say more about that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So, I mean, this in a way is foundational to a lot of the work I do, because as a coach, clients come to me with problems and things that they're struggling with. And that could be a very human life problem. It could be a leadership problem. It could be a business problem. But when we start to look at it from different lenses, and, one of the things that I always remember was one of my first jobs as an intern was working as a journalist. And I remember going in on my first day. I was fresh out of college and I was going into this. It was a newspaper in Weston-super-Mare in the UK called the Western Mercury. And this woman that took me under her belt as my mentor, she said to me, okay, if I send you out now, Jayne, to cover a burning building, what story am I going to get back? And I was thinking, I don't know what she wants me to say. And then she said, are you going to stand at the left side of the building or the right side of the building? You're going to be at the front or the back? There's 4 corners to the building. If you stand at any of those corners, you're going to give me a different story. And I think about that in terms of levels of consciousness, because I think in energy terms, like if I am an individual that leads with my physical energy, then I see the world in very physical terms. If I lead with my emotional energy, right, if I'm at that corner of the building, I see and feel the emotions. I'm empathic. I feel everything. I'm very sensitive in that way. But if I lead with my intellectual energy, that's another different world, right? So now I'm cognitive and I'm data oriented and I'm thinking through things, and I probably have a scientific mindset and I can back up everything I say. But then if we get to the spiritual and the intuitive consciousness, now I have a gut feeling. Now I have an inner knowing. Now I have a sense and a connection to something more than just me as a human, to something sacred, something divine. That gives me a very different perspective. And then if I go up to the roof and I stand on the top and I can integrate all of these four corners of the building, obviously I won't be there if it's burning, but if I'm up at the roof, I can see further than the people on the ground. I can see all of this, right? And I can integrate all of those energies, physical, emotional, cognitive, and spiritual. And now I have an awareness that I didn't have when I was on the bottom floor. So then I think of the building like the different levels of consciousness. Like what's happening on the first floor is very different to what's happening at the penthouse.
Right.
So where am I choosing to live my life? And I'll have my home frequency, definitely. I'll have my normal vibratory pattern and where I am. But what I teach is we don't want to get to the top and just stay there, because we need to, in relationship with other people and things, meet them where they are. So therefore, we need to be able to come up and down the elevator in the building to different levels of consciousness. Because if I meet someone in physical consciousness and I'm up in like spiritual, I'm not going to be able to connect with them. I'm not going to be able to resonate, because I'm talking about things that they have no information on at all. That's not the world they live in. So when I get people coming to me for coaching, I notice how they lead the problem through which energy field they lead with, but also their level of consciousness. And when we start to shift a problem to different levels of consciousness, in my questioning as a coach, I can use questions that are kind of targeted at different levels. Then we start to get a very different perspective on what it is that's happening. So that's kind of one of the ways that I work with it.
Brilliant model. I don't know if you're aware of this. I'll bet that you are. But what you just described about the 4 levels, it actually maps onto brain development as well. Whereas
right, yes. I have heard it. I'm not as familiar as you may think, but yes, the neuroscience,
the neuroscience behind it. The physical being more the reptilian brain, the fight or flight, survival mode of the brain that's always kind of like, be careful, watch out, so that fight, flight, or freeze experience. And then moving into like just reactive, the amygdala taking over. Something happens and I'm kind of reactive to it, over emotional, maybe some weak self-regulation. And then as the brain has continued to develop, you develop the prefrontal cortex, and that's where you're able to use your intellect to discern and use a little higher judgment and wisdom.
Right.
And of course, if you continue to grow in consciousness as well as the brain development, you reach the intuitive level of knowing instead of having to use intellect. So there's even a higher level of knowing, even beyond the intellect's ability to make sense of things. There's an inner knowing in the intuitive realm.
Yes, I love that. And thank you for that reminder, because in some ways I developed this through, other giants whose shoulders I stand on, people like Jung and Freud and Piaget, and the development models that we have for human growth and development. That's kind of in there, as well as the chakra system and everything we know from ancient wisdom. And some of the Vedic philosophy is in there as well. And I tried to integrate the best of what I knew, but it also feels, when I talk about it in this way, sometimes it can feel a bit esoteric. And sometimes I think this is a great way and a great metaphor for bringing it into practical reality so that everyone can hear it, because it kind of makes more sense, particularly to those that are not familiar with the kind of language that we might use in the conscious and, intuitive space.
Absolutely. No, it's so true. And it's so hard for people to understand that it is our inner world of belief, emotion, attitude, thought, perception, our inner world that defines how we experience the outer world.
Right.
I don't know if I'm like 100% that your thoughts create your things. I don't know about that. I don't think people create their cancer or being mugged or, being in a bad accident, but we certainly create our experience of the outer circumstances that we find ourselves in. And I think it's so important for people to understand and recognize that it is our inner world that will determine what we see. I had an experience with a couple of friends of mine who worked at the same place, and it was a large layoff during the pandemic. And both of them were married, both the same age, both of them had kids, relatively the same socioeconomic experience. And one of them, who I found to be just a lighthearted, engaging, positive, optimistic kind of guy, was just like, I wasn't looking to get laid off from my job, but I just, I'm so excited about what the next chapter is going to bring. And, the universe always steps up and provides. And,
Right.
he was just lovely about it. And this other friend of ours who does tend to be more sickly, more, maybe a negaholic. It's one of my coined phrases, a negaholic, a person who's just, no matter what's happening. And, he was just like, this is awful. What's going to happen to me? And, I can't believe they did that. And how what's going to happen to the world? Just all of this emotional reactivity, same circumstances, same exact, kind of socioeconomic life circumstances, but their experience of the circumstance was completely different.
Yeah.
So that's what people don't see. They don't realize when they're in it. I guess in coaching, Jayne, this, we talk about the is reality.
Yeah.
That there is no is reality. There's the reality that you're creating based on how you see it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it reminds me of that distinction. And I wish I could remember who said the quote, but I can't right now. You might remember. It's not what happens to you. It's the meaning you attach, the story you tell yourself about what happens to you that shapes your life.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's a great distinction, because we don't often pause and witness the way we're reacting or responding to things. Yeah. It's just like the water we swim in. We just, like, if that happens, we get triggered, we do this, right? And so I think that is also, in a way, part of the conscious life and the conscious living, is practicing the inner world, understanding the way that we respond to things, the way we get triggered, and what's our patterns of behavior, and how are they working out for us.
Right. Right. I mean, in some ways, I think you're defining conscious living, because what you're saying is, without the ability to observe oneself and debunk and question how it is that I'm thinking about and responding to my circumstance, I have nothing. You have no freedom. And my definition of freedom is freedom from the confinement of your own ego.
Yes.
Right? So you have no freedom if you can't observe and then alter how you're relating to the world around you. And, yes, I get it that sometimes life is really hard, or people can say, like, oh, this sucks. Why'd this happen to me? And then sometimes you just got to say, this is what's happening. Who am I going to be? How am I going to be? It's another one of my pet peeves, is people want to say, I just wish I knew why. I just wish I knew why this was happening. I wish I knew why I was this way.
Yeah.
It's such a psychologized question that leaves people stuck in the same egoic patterning, but doesn't allow for change and forward movement.
Right.
What allows for change and forward movement is, who am I going to be in the face of this?
Yeah.
How am I going to approach this differently? How do I want to be? Who do I want to be in the face of this? Rather than why? You never can, you can make up why all day long, and you're never really going to know.
Yeah. And that reminds me of one of my favorite coaching questions, which is, now that you know, what will you do differently?
Right. Now that you see this,
that
you have this conscious awareness, this repeated pattern, right? Now what?
Now what? Because that puts you in a position of choice, you see. And so many people live a life of have-tos, shoulds, Like, I think I should do this. I think I have to do this. Like, I have to do my taxes. I have to this, that, and the other. And very early on in a coaching engagement, in fact, I was doing it earlier today I've got a new client that was just coming in, and it's just like, listen to your own self speak, listen to the language, listen to the space that's so small that you're trying to fit your life within. You don't have to bend yourself like a pretzel to be these shoulds and these have tos. Like, just imagine what would be different if you start to choose. Like, I choose to do my taxes. That's a very different energy to, I have to do my taxes, right?
Right.
And so we can, I think it was Viktor Frankl. I remember reading Viktor Frankl's book a long time ago, Man's Search for Meaning. And I remember being completely blown away as a young adult by the everything that he was talking about, that he could have been in these horrific situation, and yet he still felt free. Like, I couldn't wrap my head around that for a bit. I had to really sit with it for a while.
Yeah.
And I think that those are the questions, the ones you can't answer immediately, the ones you've got no trite answer for. Those are the questions that help us in our conscious awareness, that help us practice and develop this kind of, I think of it as beginning with awareness. I don't think that kind of does the whole thing, but that's where it begins. That's like the genesis of it. Mm-hmm. And I think very often in the cultures that we live in, particularly in the West, if somebody asks us a question, we think we need to answer it like that. Well, the best questions are the ones that, like, if somebody asks me a question and I think, okay, I don't know the answer to that, and it's okay. Yeah. I need to sit with it. I need to lean into it. I need to live with it and see what it's got to teach me, because I don't always know.
Yeah, like really savor it.
Yeah.
Savor the depth of that kind of question and that kind of living.
Yeah. And that's one thing I notice about consciousness is I can't speed through it. Like, if I want to live a conscious life, I need space. I need space for me, like in my internal world. I can't just always be on the hamster wheel or on the go or on everybody else's agenda.
Yeah.
It demands a different pace of life.
Yeah, that's the definition of unconscious.
Yes, quite. Right. And don't get me wrong, I get that quite a lot.
Yeah. But I mean, that is it, right? That is the default experience of, like, the carrot is in front of you and you're on that hamster wheel and you're going to get that carrot. You're going to get that carrot, and then you get it. And it's like, all right, well, was that it?
Yeah, quite.
Right? Because when you're chasing the externals, they never satisfy. You're never satiated. No. And I do think that desire is part of human growth and development, having a next desire. But I think people chase the metaphorical carrot not because of some outer drive for achievement, but some inner drive of not knowing how to create meaning.
Yeah. And
that's not going to be the next big accomplishment. And in fact, social science research backs this up. A really good book by Tal Ben-Shahar called Happier. In his research from Harvard University, he found that people are happier in pursuit of meaningful goals than after they've accomplished them.
I would agree with that.
Right. So there's a brief uptick in happiness. I don't know if brief is a day, a week, a month. I don't know. A brief uptick of, like, I did it. And then the happiness drops off significantly when people aren't in pursuit of something meaningful.
Yeah.
And there are ways to create meaning. So I want to talk about that, Jayne. I love what you said about needing time to step back, needing inner time. And I think today a lot of people don't exactly know what that means. Does that mean I light a candle and I have, the mat and I, do my yoga? Like, what is it actually? So, I talk openly about what my practices are. I do have a morning quiet time practice and an evening quiet time practice. I love it. Although my goal, just a caveat to that, is to make my life my living practice. So that this is my practice, right here. And tonight I'm going to be writing some coursework, and that will be my practice. I go to the dog park at lunchtime and let that be my practice, right? Make my life a living prayer. That notion. But what do you teach? What do you do with your clients, Jayne? What are your practices? Let's lean in a little bit to the how-tos. And I know we're talking at a deeper level than that, but for the average consumer or the new person who's think about waking up and consciousness and what does it mean? How do you help people get started?
Well, you see, one of the first things that I would be inquiring into is what energy level, what level of consciousness are they living their life at? So it really does. I'm kind of coming back there because at the survival level, for instance, daydreaming, right? Just to sit and look out of a window and have nothing to do. And I know, some of my clients struggle with this at that level because they're like, I'm meant to be doing something. What do you mean do nothing? What do you mean just sit? Like, because we think we're meant to be human doings in this world today, right? And so it's like, no, just allow life, right? And I say to them things like, go take a walk. Right? Just go for a walk. Just go out your front door. Go for a walk. Don't have a plan laid out. Just see where the energy takes you. Right? And especially if you're on holiday in a new city, don't just follow the maps. Just go and have a day that is just like that life gifts to you. Right? And we're not used to this in the West because we're meant to be like leaders and we're meant to be, creating the plans and, working the plans and crushing it all by Friday. But, at the end of the day, this is what we're talking about. Give yourself some grace, some space, to just be you. Do what you love, not what you think somebody else wants you to do, or your partner or your spouse or your kids or whoever. Just for you. So I think at the lower levels, it's very much about self-care. I really do. And for me, I'm, my own rituals, my own stuff that I do is it changes. I'll be really honest with you. There'll be days where I'm fine to sit on a mat for like an hour and just sit and be and just really get into a trance-like state and that, and I look like I'm in an ashram in India. I look super spiritual, I'm sure. But that's, I do that. And then there are days where I cannot sit still no matter what is going on. I have to go for a walk. But then I'm walking more mindfully. I'm noticing my feet on the floor. I'm looking around me at what's there. Like I'm not just like going, because very often for me, my way of coming through the world is like 100 miles an hour. I'm going to go from A to B and I'm going to get there as quickly as I can. Yeah. That's kind of my natural MO. And what I've been practicing and learning to do over many, many years now is learning to just walk through the world. And as I've got older and more mature, it's turned into I'm learning to wander. Because as they say in that quote, not all who wander are lost.
Right.
And so it's like, what's wandering? I remember coming across this literally about 3 years ago. It's in the pandemic. And I thought I don't think I can ever think of a time where I've just wandered. Mm-hmm. Now I wander all the time. I'll just go into a national park and just wander. Don't even follow the signs sometimes, just wander. And it's amazing. Like that to me is a great.
I'm a little worried about you. How do you get out?
Well, I've actually got an incredible sense of direction. And of course, we've got our phones now, so you can see where you are, which is great. But I
have a horrible sense of direction. So you're making me nervous. I could sit and wander. I actually enjoy mental wandering. And
yes.
meandering. And you know how else I wander, Jayne? And I do love this. I love what you're saying. When you said wandering in a national park, I freaked out. So I just have to say that. I would be, you'd have to send the National Guard to come and get me.
Yeah.
I'd be slinking with the bears before you know it. But no, my practice of that, because I'd get lost and hurt myself outdoors, puttering.
Yeah, and you see, you can do that in your day.
Yes.
Like have a day where purposefully
puttering, pick up this, put away that. It's hysterical, right? I'll be like going down to do a load of wash. And on the way,
yes,
oh, these shoes need to get put away. And then as I put the shoes away, I'll see that, oh, this sweater hasn't gotten hung up in the closet. And then, oh, do I even still want these things? Oh, maybe I should start a bag for Goodwill. Start a bag for Goodwill. And then right? So
Yeah.
very circuitous, and I love it.
I do too. And, if I put that in a business context for you, I actually schedule days and I actually call them input days, right? That's what I call them. I usually have maybe 3 or 4 a month. And these input days are literally that. So I don't plan anything. I say, it's almost like I go, okay, life, what have you got in store for me today? And then, and so I'll start my day and I may just start with a bit of self-care, may have a bubble bath or a shower or something, go for a walk with the dogs. And then at some point, something will happen. I'll get a notification on my phone or something will happen, or I'll meet somebody unexpectedly and we'll go for coffee, or I see something, I'm like, oh, okay. And then I'll be reminded of a book that I want to pick up and then I want to read it. And then what always happens, without a shadow of a doubt, is I get some level of insight I could never have had if I stayed busy. I could because there'll be something in my unconscious that I'm not aware of that might be troubling me, or might be something I'm longing for, like a desire. And yet I've pushed it down so far, I don't even know it's there.
Yeah.
But in these days, they bubble up, they emerge to the surface. And I love that.
Yeah.
Because now I can do something with it. Because okay, that is there.
You're saying something so brilliant there, because I don't think people realize when we are chronically busy, it shuts down our access to intuition and insight.
Yes, that's right.
Because your frontal lobes are too actively engaged. So your seat of wisdom doesn't get any room for air.
Right.
Any room for voice or expression, because your logical, rational, sorting out, figuring it out mind is so busy and so on overdrive. And it is in those quiet places. Where do our moments of inspiration come? They come when you're driving down the road, or when you're in the shower, when you're when your busy analytical mind has shut down. Psychedelics, you mentioned them earlier as a path to transcendence. Why is that? Frontal lobes shut down.
Yeah.
It's really, really brilliant. You said something earlier that was brilliant too, that I wanted to go back to and acknowledge. And it was when I asked you, like, kind of what your practices are, or how you work with clients. And you said the first thing you do is ascertain what level of consciousness they're living in, because the practices need to be commensurate with the level of consciousness. And I can't tell you how wise that is. Because if someone, tell someone who's living in survival consciousness to go do a gratitude list.
Well, quite.
They'll be like, screw you,
Exactly.
If I could just buy groceries next week, I'd be grateful, but I'm not sure where my next whatever, my next free hour, or my next childcare, or my next meal is coming from.
Right.
It's not to say you can't be grateful in those circumstances, because you absolutely can. But I just thought it was brilliant when you said that.
Well, thank you, because that is the foundation of resonance. That's what I mean by resonance. Resonance to me starts within, right? It starts in your own internal energy field. But what I'm really speaking to with resonance is the invisible, the unconscious, all the things you can't see, right? But are really running the show. And when you start to consider resonance in the equation, you start to realize that, like, I need to be aware here and I need to be aligned here as well. So, I mean, I can say that very simply for people that are listening in, like, just think about head, heart, and hands for a minute. Are you speaking to and doing what you say you will do? Is your heart involved in this? Is your truth, your spiritual truth in your gut, the seat of your soul? Is everything in alignment here? And if it's not, you'll know, because there'll be all kinds of physical tensions and, stuff going on in your head that will derail you, right? So for me, resonance is about the dynamic connections in the invisible field. And only when we've got our own awareness and our own resonance in place do we have the capacity to start to think about, like in this space now, what's happening in the energy field between you and I? Are we resonating? And am I meeting, where you are? And are we at a similar frequency so that we can have a meaningful conversation? And that's why a lot of my work, whether it's with humans in life or leaders or business, that's why I look through this lens of consciousness, because I do believe that most of the problems we've got can be kind of solved by a shift in perception, a shift in consciousness.
And changing beliefs.
And changing, because the beliefs shift at different levels, just like the world. If you have different beliefs, the world changes. Like I believe I always think of myself and my husband. My husband lives in a dangerous world. He's really, he's done a lot of like firearm training for like the SES and the army and the military. He does gun disarms, and he's a martial artist. He does hand-to-hand combat, knife combat, all of that. So he lives in this world where, we've got to have guns hidden around the house in case somebody comes in. I've got like things that I have to do if something happens. And I got to the point in our relationship where I said, look, we were only about a few years into our marriage. And I said, I need to talk to you because I don't live in that world. And I don't want to live in that world. Oh. I live in a different, and he looks at me and he goes, you live in the world of unicorns and butterflies and flowers. And I'm like, well, kind of, but then again, I haven't had a lot of violence. I've had some in my early years, but it's like, I believe I create the world that I live in, and I don't want to attract that either. So that's not what my vibration is going to put out into the world. And I don't want to armor up in my body. I don't want to be defensive. Right. So I want to live in the world that I want to live in. And yeah, things happen that don't always fit with my world. I get that. That would be his argument, like be reality-based, Jayne. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, but I create my reality. Right. And I believe that. He doesn't, so it doesn't resonate for him. Right. But when I believe that, this is the world I live in. We drove, then this is a great example of it. We went away for a week and I didn't realize as we pulled out of the driveway, the garage door coming down hadn't fully closed and it went back up. We came back a week later and we do have cameras. Nobody had been in the garage or our home. Right. And we live in Columbus. It's not like it's it is a city that has quite a lot of crime. And I was like, see?
I have to tell you a similar story because I'm just like you, Jayne. I just live in this world. I say all the time, bad things don't happen to me. So I don't lock my house. I don't lock my car. I don't live in fear. I don't want to live in love. I don't fear. Yeah. So I went to the airport a few weeks ago and we have a new car and I left it unlocked with the keys in it, as I always do. And I'd left a couple empty gym bags on the front seat. I was doing different things, moving around, and I had a couple of empty gym bags. So when I got back from my trip and opened the door, I went to reach down. I was going to grab one of the gym bags. I needed to move some things in my luggage. I was like, the bag's not there. That's odd. That's really weird. So I thought, well, maybe I threw them in the trunk. So I went back to the trunk, looked at, they're not in the trunk. So I went back and it's like, the glove box was open and there was some things on the seat. Like, that's odd. Okay, somebody's clearly been in my car. And I walked around to the driver's seat, clean things, or whatever. Things weren't a mess. I just, put my bags in, noticed that the other bags were gone. I went to the driver's seat and opened the door. And the person who had clearly spent a couple days in my car, I think a homeless person might have stayed in my car for a while, left me a gift on the seat. Left a gift on the seat. So there was a bottle of a Powerade drink, and then there was just a little token. And I thought, see, bad things don't happen to me. I'm like, I'm so grateful. So of course, I had to come home and tell my spouse about this, who is similar to yours. Like, what? I know. And said, bad things don't happen to me.
No,
absolutely. We create how we experience life. And that's always, and then as we do that, so this is my theory, and then we should wrap up. But that it's our resonance that connects with life at the resonant level that we are, and
Exactly.
brings back to us who we are.
Yes.
So instead of a broken broken side window and glass everywhere and, things out of the car, I just get just the duffel bag, the empty duffel bag, the homeless gent or gal must have needed something to carry their belongings in. I was happy to serve. And left me a token. Anyway, so you don't get in life what you want, you get who you are.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
So Jayne,
and I do
work is it? Yeah, go ahead.
Can I just say one last thing to leave people with, which is, and you've kind of hinted at it, Jackie, but I think it's really important that people understand, your life is not just yours, right? It's not just yours to live. I believe your life is sacred. And if you were to believe that, if you just try it on for size, just for a moment, notice what changes if you believe your life is sacred. Because for me, when I started to embrace that, everything changed. And that's what put me on the path to being more conscious in life and leadership and business.
Yeah, and I'll just extend that. Even if it's not true, how does it impact your experience of life? So take it on like it's the truth. My life matters. My life is sacred, and I'm going to live to honor that truth.
Right.
Beautiful, Jayne. Jayne, people are going to want to get in touch with you. I did hear from our Conscious Living Summit that we were on together, how many people both contacted you and I saying how much they enjoyed our conversation. How can people best find you, talk to you about Sacred Changemakers, the Coach's Business School?
Yeah, so just go to sacredchangemakers.com or to my website, Jayne at JayneWarrilow.com. You'll find out all about my world in there. And I have a number of books on Amazon as well, and particularly The Secret Language of Resonance will be up soon. So go and have a deep dive and have a look.
Wonderful. It will be well worth your time to be around and get to know this extraordinary soul. Jayne, thank you so much for being with us on the Conscious Living Podcast.
Oh, Jackie, it was my pleasure. Thank you.